In the deepest recesses of time, there was a world unlike any we know today, a world where the very air froze your breath, where the sun seemed a distant, uninviting presence, and where survival meant not just physical endurance, but a battle against nature itself. This was a world locked in the iron grip of the Ice Age, approximately 12,000 years ago, during the catastrophic period known as the Younger Dryas, a time when the Earth, after experiencing centuries of warming, plunged once more into a frozen abyss, bringing with it a chilling transformation that would reshape the planet's ecosystems, its inhabitants, and the course of human history. For much of the planet, the landscape had already been swallowed by ice. Mighty glaciers, thousands of feet thick, stretched over vast portions of North America, Europe, and Asia, cutting off the world from its previous temperate climate. The ice, unyielding and indifferent to life, covered much of the land, turning it into an inhospitable wilderness where survival was anything but guaranteed. But even in this frozen wilderness, humanity, our ancestors, struggled, fought, and clawed their way through the relentless cold. The scene opens in the heart of this unforgiving world, where a small family group is gathered together in a crude shelter made of animal hides and stone. They are protected from the cold, but only just. The fire that burns in the center of their shelter flickers weakly, casting long shadows on the walls. The air is thick with the smell of wet fur, burning wood, and the earth beneath their feet. Outside, the winds howl relentlessly, carrying with them the sting of the snow, and the temperatures have plunged so low that even the strongest of the adults shiver from the cold. But within the warmth of this humble shelter, there is something far more powerful than the biting wind, the warmth of human resilience, creativity, and determination. It is here, in the heart of this frozen world, that the story of human survival unfolds. A young woman, no older than 20, is working intently on a piece of stone in her hands. She is crafting a tool, one of the most vital pieces of equipment for her people's survival. The tool will serve as both weapon and hunting implement, allowing them to procure food and protect themselves from the fierce creatures that still roam the land. Her hands move deftly, striking the stone against another with practiced precision. The stone chips away, creating a sharp edge, the product of hours of labor and skill. This moment, small yet significant, is a testament to humanity's extraordinary capacity for invention and adaptation. For without tools, survival in this brutal climate would be impossible. As she works, the camera shifts to the outside world, where the wind howls across the barren tundra, the snow swirling in great gusts. The landscape is almost entirely white, a vast sea of ice and snow that stretches endlessly into the horizon. The silence is deafening, punctuated only by the eerie whistle of the wind. The once lush forests and meadows full of life have been replaced by a stark, uninviting emptiness. The mammoths, those great behemoths that once roamed in large herds across the plains, are now rare sights, dwindling in number, as the harsh climate makes it increasingly difficult for them to survive. Other animals, too, are disappearing from the land, their food sources vanishing with the changing climate. Yet, even in the face of such overwhelming odds, the family group persists. The tools they create, like the one the young woman is crafting, are not merely instruments. They are the means by which humanity can hold its own against the crushing forces of nature. They are symbols of hope, of life continuing against all odds. The camera returns to the fire within the shelter, where the family sits close together, the warmth from the flames radiating against the cold. Their faces are illuminated by the soft glow of the firelight, their eyes filled with determination and quiet resolve. The youngest child, barely old enough to walk, plays with a small piece of bone that has been shaped into a toy. The family is a tight-knit unit, bound together not only by blood but by the shared experience of survival. Every meal, every moment of warmth, every tool crafted is the result of their collective effort. The bond they share is unspoken, but it is felt in every action they take. As the fire burns, the camera pans to the walls of the shelter, where ancient paintings are etched into the stone. These are not just mere images. They are the stories of the people who lived in this harsh world, their lives preserved for future generations. The paintings depict scenes of hunting, of daily life, of the animals they once relied on, and of the sacred rituals that marked their existence. They are a record of a time that, though distant, still resonates with us today. These paintings are not just art, they are a testament to humanity's desire to leave something behind, to ensure that their existence is remembered. As the woman finishes crafting her tool, she looks up, her eyes meeting those of the others in the group. A moment of quiet understanding passes between them. There is no need for words. The work is done. The survival of the family depends on what they have just created. In the distance, a mammoth herd is spotted. This sight, though rare, provides a fleeting moment of hope, a chance at food that could carry them through the coming weeks. The family gathers its tools and prepares for the hunt. This will be a dangerous task, fraught with risk, but it is necessary. As the hunt begins, the landscape unfolds before them, vast and inhospitable, stretching as far as the eye can see. The snow crunches beneath their feet as they move cautiously forward. The mammoths, though massive, are not invincible. They have their own defenses, their own survival instincts. The hunt is a dance of life and death, a delicate balance between predator and prey. The family moves with precision, guided by the knowledge passed down through generations. They use their tools, each one a product of years of innovation and trial and error, to bring down the mighty mammoth. When the hunt is over, the camera shifts to the family, their faces flushed with exhaustion, but also with satisfaction. They have succeeded for now. The mammoth will provide them with food, with clothing, with tools, and with the sustenance they need to survive another day in this unforgiving world. But the struggle is far from over. Outside, the winds continue to howl. The temperature continues to drop. The earth remains unyielding in its cold embrace. The family huddles together around the fire, their faces bathed in its warmth. They are weary, but they are not defeated. The camera lingers on their expressions, on the strength in their eyes, on the hope that burns within them. Their survival, like that of every human who came before them, is the result of ingenuity, of creativity, of an unrelenting will to survive. And as the camera pulls back to show the vast, frozen landscape once more, the viewer is left with a profound sense of awe. These early humans, against all odds, created a future for themselves. They adapted, they innovated, and they survived. In the face of nature's most brutal forces, they thrived. The legacy of these early survivors is a story that continues to unfold today. We, their descendants, carry with us the knowledge, the creativity, and the will to endure that they so fiercely demonstrated in those early days of human history. As the camera fades to black, we are reminded that even in the darkest of times, there is always a spark of light, always a flicker of hope that can lead us forward. The story of humanity's survival, of our resilience in the face of environmental destruction, is far from over. It is a story that continues to shape the world we live in today, and it is a story that will continue for generations to come. As the ice continued its relentless grip on the northern expanse, the earth held its breath. For generations, humanity had fought against the cold, the storms, the darkness of the long winters. But now there was a new threat on the horizon. The climate, once a predictable force, had become volatile. The glaciers that had once seemed so invincible were now beginning to show signs of retreat. But this retreat brought with it an even greater challenge. The world was in the midst of a transition, and humanity was once again being forced to adapt. This was the epoch of the Younger Dryas, a period of sudden, catastrophic climate change that shook the foundations of human civilization. The warming that had begun after the last glacial maximum came to a screeching halt as the earth plunged into an unexpected cold snap. It was as though nature had pushed a reset button, sending the world back into a deep freeze. What had seemed like a glimmer of hope and opportunity to rebuild, to flourish, suddenly became another battle for survival. It was a time of extraordinary hardship, a time when the very foundation of human existence was called into question. How would humanity respond to this new challenge? Could the ingenuity that had carried our ancestors through the Ice Age be enough to withstand this second catastrophe? The cold returned with a vengeance, sweeping across vast stretches of land that had once been lush and fertile. The once thriving landscapes of Europe and Asia began to freeze once again, and the people who had learned to live in the shadow of the glaciers were now faced with the prospect of an even more unforgiving world. It was as if the earth itself was testing humanity's resolve, pushing its limits to see just how far it could go. But in the face of this new threat, humanity proved once again that survival was not just about enduring, it was about innovation, cooperation, and resilience. The people of the Younger Dryas were forced to rethink everything they knew about survival. The old ways, the ways that had allowed them to endure the first onslaught of ice, were no longer enough. The environment was changing too quickly, too unpredictably. In this time of crisis, humans turned inward, seeking new ways to adapt. They found new sources of food, new methods of shelter, and new ways to harness the power of fire. They banded together in tighter communities, sharing knowledge, resources, and skills. In the midst of this struggle, the social fabric of humanity began to take shape. It was in this moment that the first true signs of civilization began to emerge. The need for cooperation and the sharing of resources drove early humans to develop more complex systems of organization. People learned that survival did not only depend on individual effort, it depended on the strength of the collective. This realization would form the bedrock of future human societies, as communities grew in size and complexity, driven by the need to survive and thrive in an ever-changing world. Archaeological evidence from this period reveals a world on the brink of transformation. The tools, weapons, and artifacts that have survived from this era are not just relics of survival. They are symbols of human ingenuity in the face of overwhelming adversity. The earliest forms of agriculture began to take root during this time, as humans learned to cultivate the land and domesticate animals, laying the groundwork for the rise of permanent settlements. These changes would mark the beginning of the transition from a hunter-gatherer existence to an agrarian society, a shift that would ultimately shape the course of human history. But survival during the Younger Dryas was not simply a matter of physical endurance. It was also a test of human creativity and adaptability. In the face of an increasingly harsh and unpredictable environment, humans had to develop new ways of thinking, new ways of interacting with the world. They had to become more resourceful, more imaginative. This is evident in the art and cultural expressions that have been uncovered by archaeologists. The cave paintings, carvings, and sculptures of this time reveal a people who, even in the darkest moments, found ways to express their creativity, to make meaning in a world that seemed bent on destruction. These early artists used the natural world around them as a canvas, depicting animals, human figures, and scenes of daily life in ways that reflected their deep connection to the land. It is through these images that we gain insight into the mindset of the people who lived during this tumultuous time. They were not just survivors, they were creators, dreamers, storytellers. They used art as a way to process their experiences, to communicate with each other, and to pass down their stories to future generations. The imagery that adorned the walls of caves like those in Lascaux and Altamira is more than just decoration. It is a testament to the enduring human spirit, to the drive to make sense of a chaotic world. The Younger Dryas was not just a period of cold and destruction. It was a time of incredible transformation. It was a moment when humanity's resilience, creativity, and capacity for adaptation were pushed to their absolute limits. But in the end, it was this very resilience that allowed humanity to emerge from the ice. As the cold receded and the earth began to warm once again, the people of the Younger Dryas were not the same as they had been before. They had changed, they had learned, and they had prepared. The environment had forced them to evolve, and as they did, they carried with them the knowledge and skills that would shape the future of human civilization. The transition out of the Younger Dryas marked the beginning of a new era in human history. The harsh conditions of the past had shaped humanity's survival strategies, but it was now time to build on those foundations. With the return of a more stable climate, the ancient people began to build permanent settlements, establish farming practices, and develop new technologies. The story of the Younger Dryas is not just a story of survival. It is a story of human evolution. It is a testament to the capacity of humanity to adapt to extreme conditions, to innovate in the face of adversity, and to build a better future. The lessons learned during this period would reverberate throughout history, influencing everything from the rise of agriculture to the development of early cities. It was during the period after the Younger Dryas that some of the first great civilizations began to emerge. The Fertile Crescent, once a barren wasteland, was now home to thriving communities that had learned to tame the land, to harness its resources, and to create complex social structures. These early civilizations would go on to shape the course of human history, laying the foundations for the modern world. But the story of humanity's survival during the Ice Age is not just one of triumph over nature. It is also a story of the deep connection between humans and the environment. The harsh conditions of the Younger Dryas, the challenges posed by the cold and the ice, forced humanity to develop a relationship with the earth that was based on respect, ingenuity, and survival. As humanity moved out of the Ice Age and into a new era, they carried with them the knowledge of how to live in harmony with nature, how to adapt to the changing climate, and how to survive in a world that was constantly shifting. It is this relationship, forged in the crucible of the Ice Age, that continues to shape human civilization to this day. As we look back on the struggles of our ancestors, we are reminded of the strength and resilience that has always been a part of the human spirit. Their survival was not just a victory over the elements. It was a victory of the human will. They did not simply endure the harshness of the environment. They adapted, they innovated, and they built a future. And in doing so, they created a legacy that continues to inspire us to this day. The journey from the Ice Age to the dawn of civilization was long and fraught with challenges. But it was also a journey of incredible creativity, resilience, and hope. It was a journey that shaped the human story, laying the groundwork for everything that would come after. As we face the challenges of our own time, we must look to the past for inspiration, for the same resilience and ingenuity that allowed our ancestors to survive the Ice Age are the qualities that will guide us through the challenges of the future. The story of humanity's survival in the face of extreme adversity is one of the most powerful narratives in our history. It is a reminder of our capacity to adapt, to innovate, and to thrive. And it is a testament to the enduring strength of the human spirit, a strength that will continue to carry us forward, no matter what challenges lie ahead. As the fire crackles and the night grows colder, the tribe huddles closer, each individual searching for warmth, not just in the flames, but in each other. The patriarch, his face marked by the passage of time and weather, speaks of the challenges yet to come. He does not tell the children tales of victory and easy triumph, but of the difficulties that are ahead, the challenges that test not only their bodies but their spirit. The fire flickers, casting brief shadows on the walls of their shelter, but the tribe is not deterred. There is a quiet strength in their unity, an unspoken promise that whatever lies ahead, they will face it together. The days have grown shorter and the nights longer. The harsh cold, a constant companion, bites at their skin and numbs their fingers. But in the stillness of the night, when the winds howl like wolves outside their shelter, there are moments of warmth. The mother hums softly as she mends the torn furs that protect their bodies from the brutal cold. Her fingers move with care, each stitch a small act of love, a symbol of her determination to shield her family from the world outside. The children gather around her, their faces tired but content, as they listen to the stories she shares, stories of ancestors who faced the same struggles and yet endured. One of the younger children, a boy no older than 8, looks up at his father with wide, eager eyes. He is at the age when the world is still full of wonder, when the unknown beckons with promises of adventure. He asks his father, in a voice full of innocence, if they will ever see the sun shine again. The father, looking down at his son, pauses for a moment. The weight of the question hangs in the air, heavier than the cold itself. Finally he answers, his voice steady, but with a hint of sadness. The sun will return, my son, but not yet. For now we endure the darkness, and we learn to live in it. The mother looks over at her husband, her eyes reflecting a silent understanding. She knows the answer is not just for the child, but for her as well. They have seen the world change before their eyes, the seasons shift in ways that they cannot always predict or control. The land, once fertile and generous, now seems to conspire against them, yielding less and less each day. The once abundant herds are smaller, scattered, harder to find. The hunt is no longer a guarantee, and their survival is increasingly uncertain. But it is not in despair that they face the future. It is in resolve, for they know that no matter the challenges, they will find a way. As the days pass, the family continues their struggle, each day a small victory against the elements. They gather what little food they can, their hands raw from the effort, their bodies aching from the endless toil. Yet there is still time for moments of joy, for laughter that rings through the cold air like a defiant song. The father teaches the children to carve tools from bone and stone, each movement a lesson in patience and skill. The mother, too, shares her knowledge, showing the children how to weave baskets from the tough grasses that grow in the sheltered valleys. These small acts of creation are their way of asserting control in a world that constantly seems to be slipping from their grasp. But even as they create, they cannot ignore the creeping dangers that surround them. The earth continues to shift beneath their feet, as if it too is uncertain of its own future. The ice continues to advance, the glaciers crawling across the land like silent, unfeeling giants. The herds of animals they rely on for food grow fewer, their migration patterns disrupted by the changing environment. In the distance, the sky is often streaked with the dark smoke of volcanic eruptions, the ash falling like black rain over the land, further suffocating the world beneath a shroud of desolation. The climate is unstable, unpredictable, and they are at the mercy of forces beyond their control. Yet despite this, the tribe does not falter. They move through the land like ghosts, slipping through the cracks in the earth, always alert, always vigilant. They have learned the rhythms of the world around them, how to read the signs in the sky, the tracks in the snow, the calls of the birds. They have learned to live with the uncertainty, to embrace it, and in doing so, they have become stronger. Every hunt, every gathering, every day spent in survival is a testament to their will to live. But there are moments when doubt creeps in, when the weight of the struggle threatens to break them. It is in these moments that the bonds of family and community are tested most. The father, a man who has spent his life hunting the great beasts of the land, now finds himself struggling to provide for his family. The prey is becoming scarcer, and the animals they once hunted with ease now seem elusive, almost mocking in their ability to slip away. One evening after a particularly fruitless day, he returns to the shelter empty-handed. His shoulders are slumped, his face drawn with exhaustion and frustration. The family has already gathered around the fire, but the warmth of the flames cannot chase away the tension in the air. The children look up at him, their faces filled with a mixture of hope and fear. The mother meets his gaze, and in that moment they both know the weight of the unspoken question, "What now?" But the father does not give in to despair. He sits down beside the fire, his body aching, but his mind already calculating the next steps. There is always a next step. He tells the family of the new plan, to travel further, deeper into the mountains where the ice has not yet claimed the land. It is a dangerous journey fraught with unknowns, but it is a chance to find new hunting grounds, a chance to find food. The mother does not hesitate. She nods, her face set with the same determination that has carried them this far. The children, though afraid, trust their parents. They gather their belongings and prepare for the journey ahead, knowing that they will walk it together, as a family, as a tribe. The journey is long, and the landscape grows more treacherous with each passing day. The winds whip at their faces, the snow stinging like shards of ice. The terrain is uneven, and they are forced to climb over frozen rivers and through dense forests, their steps slow and cautious. The mother keeps the children close, her arms wrapped around them for warmth, while the father leads the way, his eyes scanning the horizon for signs of danger. They move like shadows, each step an effort against the elements, each breath a struggle against the cold. But they continue on, driven by the hope that there is something better ahead. After days of travel, they finally reach the highlands, a place where the ice has not yet claimed the land. Here the air is thinner, the ground uneven, but the landscape is alive with the sounds of animals. The father spots tracks in the snow, fresh tracks, and a spark of hope ignites in his chest. The hunt can begin again. The tribe sets up camp, and the father goes out with his spear, while the mother tends to the fire. She watches her children, their faces glowing with excitement and fear, as they help gather wood and prepare for the evening. The promise of food, of survival, hangs in the air. The father returns hours later, his hands full of game. His eyes shine with the triumph of the hunt, the weight of the kill heavy in his arms. The tribe gathers around him, their faces a mix of relief and joy. The children run to him, their laughter echoing through the crisp air. For a moment the cold is forgotten, replaced by the warmth of their success. The mother kneels beside him, her hands moving quickly to prepare the meat, to cook it for the family. The fire blazes brightly, and the warmth fills the shelter. They are alive. And in that moment, they are not just surviving, they are thriving. The fire flickers once more, casting long shadows across the shelter, as the tribe gathers around to share their meal. The father speaks of the future, of the changes they have seen and the ones yet to come. He speaks not just of survival, but of the legacy they will leave behind. His voice is full of hope, a hope that is passed down through generations. The children listen, their eyes wide with wonder. The world is still harsh, still uncertain, but in this moment they know that they are not alone. Together they will endure. As the centuries pressed forward, the harshness of the environment never relented, and yet human beings, resilient in their spirit, refused to be crushed. The blizzards howled over the desolate tundra, and the skies were often dark with the thick clouds of an unforgiving world. The earth trembled with the forces of nature, yet in the silence of caves and the refuge of rudimentary shelters, there was the quiet hum of innovation. It was here, in the midst of the Ice Age's brutal cold, that the fire of human creativity burned brightest. There were no cities, no towering monuments, but in the hearts of those who lived in the shadow of glaciers, there was a fire that would not only keep them warm, but would forge their survival against all odds. The ice-covered plains stretched as far as the eye could see, yet the ingenuity of mankind stretched farther. They fashioned tools from stone, bone, and ivory, materials born from the land that had been shaped by ice over millennia. A spearhead made from flint could pierce the thick hides of mammoths, whose massive tusked forms roamed the snow-filled plains. The blades of knives could carve through the toughest of meat, making the difference between life and starvation. Even more remarkably, these tools weren't simply created. They were refined, perfected through generations of trial and error, shaping the survival of the human race. They learned the art of fire, and with it came the power to transform their world. Stone and wood, once cold and unyielding, became the medium of life itself, and it was not just in the utilitarian need for survival that human creativity was expressed. Across the walls of caves, deep in the shadows, paintings were born, vivid depictions of the animals they hunted and the world they lived in. The forms of bison, horses, and woolly mammoths took shape on rock, their outlines darkened by soot from fire, their bodies brought to life by the hands of those who lived with them. This wasn't simply decoration. It was a language, a form of communication, a way to connect the present with the past, and the hunter with the hunted. The paintings were more than just art. They were spiritual acts, acts that invoked the essence of the animals and the forces of nature that were both their enemies and their sustenance. As they adapted to the harsh environment, so too did their relationship with the earth evolve. The bone needles and scrapers they used were not just tools, but were extensions of their will to survive. They knew the terrain as well as they knew their own bodies, understanding the animals they hunted and the plants they gathered. In the darkest nights, when the winds howled and the snow fell in unrelenting sheets, the warmth of a fire and the shared laughter of those gathered around it were the only comforts they could count on. The animals they hunted were not simply prey. They were lifelines, their skins turned into clothing to protect against the biting cold, their bones crafted into tools that could endure the harshest of conditions. Yet even in the darkest hours, even in the face of nature's relentless power, the human spirit did not waver. The cries of children echoed in the shelters built from stone and wood, their laughter a testament to the persistence of life in the face of adversity. There was joy in the making of tools, in the crafting of shelter, in the creation of art, for these were the very things that made survival possible. As the centuries passed and the glaciers began their slow retreat, the world around them began to change. The ice that had once covered the earth receded, and the tundra slowly gave way to forests and grasslands. With this warming came new challenges. The land that had once been the domain of mammoths and rhinoceroses was now home to new species, new predators, and new opportunities for growth. The shift in climate was dramatic, and yet human beings adapted once more, changing their ways to meet the needs of a new world. Their shelters, once built for the cold of the Ice Age, now evolved to meet the needs of a warmer world. They learned to adapt to the changing seasons, planting crops, creating irrigation systems, and developing new tools that could work in this warmer, more fertile world. Yet, despite these new developments, the underlying theme of human survival remained unchanged. The ingenuity of the human mind, the creativity that had sparked the first tools, the first fire, and the first art, was now focused on new challenges. Humanity had crossed a threshold, moving from survival to thriving, as they began to shape not just their tools and shelters, but the world around them. The global climate shifts of the Younger Dryas, a sudden cold snap that briefly returned the earth to its icy roots, would test their resilience once again. As temperatures plummeted, ecosystems were disrupted, and the balance of life hung by a thread. Yet, even in the face of this temporary return to harsh conditions, the ingenuity of mankind never faltered. They adapted once more, altering their lifestyles, their diets, and their technologies to meet the demands of an unpredictable world. They didn't just endure. They thrived, continually refining their ability to navigate the changing world. They discovered new materials, new ways of crafting, and new methods of hunting and gathering. They learned to store food, to predict the weather, and to track the movements of animals across vast distances. And they did so together, families huddling in shelters, communities bonding over shared struggles and triumphs, and individuals creating the tools that would carry them forward into the future. In this way, humanity's story is not one of mere survival, but of the constant reinvention of life itself. Even in the most extreme environments, the human spirit has a remarkable ability to adapt, to grow, and to innovate. From the glaciers of the Ice Age to the fields of the Neolithic Revolution, the human drive to conquer the impossible is written in the very bones of the earth. The tools, the art, the shelters, all of these are markers of our journey, each one a testament to the resilience and brilliance of those who came before us. And as the ages passed, each new generation built upon the innovations of the past, creating a chain of progress that stretches from the fires of prehistory to the world we inhabit today. The echoes of that first fire, the first stone tool, the first shelter made from mammoth bones, still resonate in the technologies we use, the cities we build, and the lives we lead. The journey of human survival is a never-ending story, a tale of innovation and resilience, of adaptation and creativity. And as long as humanity endures, the story will continue, each new chapter adding to the legacy of those who came before us, those who refused to be overcome by the challenges of their world, and who, through ingenuity, creativity, and an unwavering determination to survive, shaped the world we now call home. The hunt for the mammoth, once a spectacle of coordinated effort and survival, now felt like an echo of the past. As the world warmed, the ice that once stretched across vast territories began to retreat, altering not only the landscape, but the very essence of life. The mighty herds of mammoths that once thundered across the plains were now mere shadows of what they had been. The humans, though resilient, found themselves facing an ever-changing environment where the familiar patterns of nature began to fade and the rules of survival grew more complicated. Yet this did not mark the end of their connection with the wild. It was instead the beginning of a new chapter where adaptability, innovation, and creativity would be tested as never before. Amid the increasingly unpredictable shifts in weather patterns and the dwindling resources around them, humans began to rethink their relationship with nature. The mammoth, once a cornerstone of their existence, was now gone from their immediate surroundings, and they had no choice but to search for new sources of sustenance. The reindeer, with their sleek bodies adapted to the cold, followed the retreating ice, and their presence provided new opportunities for hunting. These animals, though different, were just as vital to survival. But it wasn't just their meat or fur that the humans sought. It was the deeper, more profound connection that came with hunting these creatures. Every successful hunt was more than just a means of survival. It was a reaffirmation of the human spirit, a triumph over the unpredictable forces of nature. In the small, scattered communities that survived the Ice Age, the daily rituals of life became a delicate balance between survival and thriving. The domestication of animals, such as the dog, the early cattle, and the horse, brought forth a shift in the human-animal dynamic. No longer were these creatures mere prey or companions. They were essential parts of the family. Dogs, once wild hunters, now became guardians and workers, protecting the family and helping to herd animals or pull sleds through snowdrifts. The cattle, though still far from the large, majestic creatures they would become, provided a steady source of milk and meat. They were integral to life in the harsh conditions that increasingly dominated the world. But despite these advancements, The challenges at the time remained daunting. The younger Dryas, a sudden and brutal return to Ice Age conditions, was a reminder of the fragility of life in these unforgiving times. Temperatures plunged again, and once fertile lands became barren deserts, cracking open beneath the relentless chill. The animals that had once thrived in this world began to disappear. Some adapted, others perished. The woolly mammoth, that towering creature of legend, was now lost to time, its bones scattered across the earth, whispering a tale of what once was. This climate shift, devastating as it was, forced humans to become even more inventive. They hunted smaller game, fished in freezing rivers, and developed more efficient ways of preserving food. Each generation learned from the last, their knowledge growing more sophisticated, their methods more precise. They mastered fire, which not only provided warmth, but enabled them to cook food in ways that made it more nourishing. The smoke from their fires curled upward, a small defiance against the cold, against the dark. In these times of great uncertainty, when even the land itself seemed to conspire against them, the humans found solace in their bond with animals. The wolf, wild and untamed, became their silent ally. It was from the wolf that the domesticated dog evolved, a testament to the long, slow process of mutual respect and shared understanding between human and animal. As the bond grew stronger, so did their survival rate. The dogs helped hunt, kept watch, and provided companionship. The cattle, though distant in nature from the wild beasts of old, became a source of sustenance in a way that no other animal could. The cycle of life, once centered around the hunt, now encompassed farming, herding, and a careful stewardship of the land. The human-animal connection deepened, evolving into something far more complex and enduring. Yet, even in the warmth of this domestic life, the wild world still called to them. The forests, the rivers, and the vast open plains whispered tales of animals that once roamed freely, now reduced to mere memories. The human spirit, though forged through the trials of survival, could not forget the creatures that had once shared their world. With each passing day, the relationship between humans and animals was tested, pushed to the brink of extinction and rebirth. As humanity learned to live with the animals they had tamed, they also learned the importance of living in harmony with nature. The nomadic tribes that roamed the vast expanses of the earth became not conquerors, but caretakers, partners with the land, with the animals, and with the shifting climate that bound them all. Amid the struggles for survival, moments of warmth and joy flickered. The bond of family, stronger than any cold, was forged in these fires. Children learned the ways of their elders, not only how to hunt, to create tools, and to survive, but also how to honor the world around them. They painted images of the animals they hunted on the walls of caves, their hands leaving behind a legacy of reverence. The act of art, so intertwined with survival, became a spiritual expression, a way of connecting not just with the world, but with the divine forces they believed shaped it. These early humans, though separated by millennia, left behind their stories in the form of symbols, drawings, and song stories that carried forward the message of humanity's eternal connection to the earth and its creatures. The cycles of life continued, each generation leaving its mark on the land, the animals, and the world. As the climate slowly stabilized, the humans adapted once again, finding new ways to thrive. They domesticated new animals, invented new tools, and began to build the foundations of the societies that would one day span the globe. Yet Through it all, the essential bond between humans and animals remained unchanged. The reindeer still roamed the northern plains, the wild boar still rooted in the forests, and the herding dogs continued to watch over their human companions. Even as the world grew more complex, this simple, essential relationship endured, a reminder that humanity's survival was never truly individual. It was always a shared journey, one that wove together the threads of life, death, and rebirth. And as the seasons passed, as the winds shifted and the landscapes changed, the legacy of these early humans persisted. They had learned through fire and frost, through blood and bone, that survival was not a solitary endeavor. It was a partnership, an unbreakable bond between human and animal, between civilization and wilderness. This was the truth that carried them through the darkest of times, the knowledge that they were not separate from the world around them, but part of it. The mammoth, though long gone, still lived on in their hearts, its spirit forever entwined with the humans who had hunted it, revered it, and ultimately learned from it. And in the quiet moments of reflection, when the world seemed at peace, the humans would remember the lessons they had learned in the cold, dark times. They would remember that survival was not just about enduring. It was about adapting, respecting, and thriving in the face of an ever-changing world. This bond, forged over millennia, shaped the course of history. The animals that had once been their companions in the wild became the foundation of civilizations. The domesticated dog, the horse, the cattle, these creatures would go on to change the very fabric of human society. But the legacy of the hunt, the memory of the great beasts that had once roamed the earth, remained a vital part of the human consciousness. They were not just animals. They were symbols of humanity's resilience, their ability to adapt, and their capacity to thrive in even the most inhospitable of environments. And so, as the world continued to turn, as empires rose and fell, the bond between human and animal endured, forever intertwined, forever essential to the story of life itself. The world has become even colder. The glaciers have moved further, spreading their frozen grip over lands that once teemed with life. The winds howl bitter and unyielding, cutting across the plains, the mountains, and the deep, dark forests. This is no longer a mere struggle for survival. It is an existential battle for the soul of humanity itself. But amidst this relentless struggle, something remarkable is happening. There is a shift, a quiet revolution, born not from the fury of nature, but from the hearts of those who endure. The seeds of culture, once small and fragile, now take root in ways that will shape the course of human history. This is a story of people who refuse to be reduced to mere survivors, people who find beauty and meaning in even the harshest of circumstances. It is a story of art, of rituals, of community, of hope, and above all, of resilience. From the caves of Europe to the ice-bound wildernesses of Asia, human beings are not just enduring, they are thriving in ways unimaginable, creating, imagining, and bonding in the face of unimaginable adversity. And while the ice continues its march, pushing humanity to the edge of existence, it is in these quiet, intimate moments that we see the true brilliance of the human spirit. In the flickering light of a fire, in the rhythm of a dance, in the ancient echoes of songs sung to the gods, the foundations of a new world are being laid. It is not just a world of survival, it is a world of expression, of connection, and of shared meaning. The elders, those who have seen the world change in ways that seem impossible, hold the knowledge of survival, yes, but also the wisdom of storytelling. They teach the young not just how to survive, but how to live. They pass down the ancient tales, the stories of the first hunt, the first fire, the first cave painting. In these stories, time bends and the past and future merge. The children listen, wide-eyed, their imaginations ignited. For them, these tales are more than mere stories. They are the blueprint for a life that reaches beyond the limitations of survival. They are the seeds of civilization itself. As the fire burns low, these children, too, begin to learn the art of creation, of crafting, of carving, of weaving. The cold may steal warmth from their bodies, but it cannot steal their creativity. They are the first artists, the first poets, the first storytellers of a world that is still being shaped by their hands. Each line they carve into bone, each pattern they paint on the walls of their cave is a testament to the power of the human spirit. But even as they create, even as they bond, the brutality of their environment presses in. The cold becomes colder, the land drier, the animals harder to hunt. The vast herds of mammoths, once so plentiful, have begun to dwindle. The grasses grow sparse and the rivers freeze. The survival of humanity and all life is threatened more than ever. Yet the people adapt. They begin to form alliances, not just with neighboring tribes, but with the very landscape itself. They learn to track the stars, to read the winds, to understand the subtle signs of the land. They begin to share more than just tools. They share knowledge. The exchange of goods turns into the exchange of ideas. A spearhead is traded for a tale of a distant mountain, a carved bone for a new method of starting a fire. These exchanges are the first seeds of trade, and with trade comes culture, the subtle but profound bonds that connect distant peoples. In the valleys, communities grow tighter. Social structures emerge not just for survival, but for the flourishing of human potential. Elders sit at the center of their communities, offering not just wisdom, but the rituals that define them. These rituals, passed down through generations, hold the people together, even as the world around them threatens to tear them apart. They are both practical and spiritual dances to ensure a successful hunt, songs to honor the spirits of the land, prayers to the gods who command the cold winds. But beneath these rituals lies something more, a deep sense of connection. The first stirrings of a society that will one day span continents. There is no distinction yet between the sacred and the mundane. In this time, every act is a sacred one. Every stone tool, every carved bone, every painted image is an offering to the divine forces that govern their lives. And as these people gather around their fires, exchanging stories and dreams, a new understanding of the world emerges. The land may be harsh, but the people are strong. They have survived through their ingenuity, their resourcefulness, and above all, their unity. There is a deep, unspoken bond between them, a bond that transcends survival. They are not just enduring the cold, they are shaping their future. This is the moment when human culture begins to solidify, when the first seeds of civilization are planted. But even as the world seems to be on the brink of collapse, there is a remarkable thing happening. Humanity is not retreating. They are not hiding in fear of the cold or the dark. They are pushing forward, expanding their reach, and challenging the boundaries of the world they inhabit. From the frozen tundras of Siberia to the warm caves of southern Europe, humanity is spreading. They are no longer bound by the cold or the earth. The warmth they create within their communities through art, through stories, through rituals becomes the true force that drives them forward. And as they venture further into the unknown, they encounter new challenges, new environments, new creatures, and new peoples. But with every challenge, they find new ways to adapt, new ways to connect. The art they create becomes more sophisticated, more expressive. The tools they craft become more refined. Their homes become more comfortable, more enduring. Even as the climate shifts, as the ice retreats and advances, they learn to live in harmony with the land. They are no longer simply surviving. They are thriving. It is in these moments, as they continue to evolve, that we see the true legacy of these early peoples. They did not simply survive the Ice Age. They gave rise to the foundations of civilization itself. Through their art, their rituals, their creativity, and their community, they created a culture that would survive far beyond the glaciers. They created a legacy that would span millennia. A legacy of connection, of resilience, and of unshakable hope. The ice may have retreated, the glaciers may have melted, but the stories of these first people will remain forever etched in the history of humanity. They are the first builders, the first artists, the first community, and their legacy is the legacy of all of us. This is not the end of their story. This is just the beginning. It is a story that continues to unfold from the first caves to the rise of cities, from the fires of the first hearths to the great fires of civilization. It is a story of survival, yes, but it is also a story of triumph, a story of a people who, against all odds, found not just a way to survive, but a way to live. And in doing so, they gave us a world of culture, of art, of connection, and of hope. They gave us the world we know today. The world had already seen the worst. The fires, the ice, the droughts, all of it had left scars on both the earth and the people who walked upon it. But as the Ice Age receded, humanity was forced to confront a new reality. The aftermath of that frozen hell had laid waste to once thriving ecosystems. In the time it took for the world to warm, the earth had not simply restored itself to what it was. It had become something different, something more hostile. The fragile balance between humanity and nature had been shattered. The ice that once threatened to erase humanity now gave way to heat so intense it scorched the land. Deserts began to spread where lush forests had once stood. The oceans, too, shifted, rising and falling with relentless tides, submerging ancient lands and reclaiming territories once thought to be safe havens. But in this chaos, something extraordinary was unfolding. Humanity, though battered, though tested to its very limits, was not simply enduring this new world. It was transforming, adapting, finding new ways to not only survive, but to thrive. In the ruins of their once grand cities, the survivors began to rebuild. The great empires of the past were no more, but out of their ashes, a new kind of society emerged, one more aware of the fragility of the world, yet ever more determined to shape their destiny. It was in the cracks of this destroyed world that humanity's true resilience shone through. The collapse of civilization had forced people to rely on what they had once taken for granted, each other. The idea of the individual, once glorified, gave way to an understanding of the collective. Communities grew tighter, not just for survival, but for the deep, unspoken need to preserve what they had left. It was in these small, interconnected pockets of humanity that creativity flourished once more. People who had once relied on external luxuries found new joy in simple pleasures. They forged relationships not just through kinship, but through shared labor. The art of survival became the art of living. Where food was scarce, every meal became an act of gratitude, each drop of water a treasure. Yet, even as humanity adapted to these harsh conditions, a subtle unease lingered in the air. The scars of the earth were still visible, the shifting sands of deserts that once teemed with life, the volcanic eruptions that had blotted out the sun, the wildfires that scorched everything in their path. Even as the world was slowly healing, the unpredictable forces of nature threatened to undo all the hard-won progress. The challenge was not just survival anymore. The challenge was understanding the earth in all its complexity and learning how to coexist with its capricious whims. The people who had emerged from the ice ages, who had endured the worst humanity could imagine, now found themselves in the age of adaptation, of transformation. But this was no easy task. The delicate ecosystems they had once taken for granted were now shifting in ways they could not predict. As climate continued to fluctuate, ancient migration routes of animals were cut off, making hunting even more dangerous and uncertain. The crops that had once flourished in fertile plains began to fail under the scorching sun. Yet in this adversity, humanity's capacity for creativity had already set the stage for something profound. The rise of agriculture, which had begun long before the Ice Age's retreat, now became more sophisticated. It was no longer just about surviving the elements, it was about mastering them. With water scarcity came the creation of advanced irrigation systems, the clever use of aqueducts and reservoirs to harness every drop of precious water. Where food shortages plagued entire regions, humans began to innovate in new and unexpected ways, cultivating crops that were more resilient to the extremes of climate, learning to rotate crops, developing better soil management techniques, and trading ideas across vast distances. Even in the face of this relentless uncertainty, there was a remarkable unity that began to form between the scattered pockets of human civilization. It was as though the struggles of the past had fused humanity together into something greater than the sum of its parts. The desire to adapt, to learn from the past and mold the future, became a shared vision. New philosophies, new belief systems began to spread across the lands, all rooted in the understanding that survival depended not just on the individual, but on the collective will of the people. This era of rebuilding saw the birth of great inventions that would lay the foundation for an entirely new world. But these inventions were not just about technology. They were about understanding the earth, the skies, the seas. It was the development of early astronomy that allowed people to predict weather patterns, to navigate the oceans and the deserts with precision. It was the innovation of new energy sources, windmills, water wheels, that helped harness nature's power without ravaging the land. It was the development of medicine, of early surgery, that enabled human beings to live longer, healthier lives despite the environmental challenges. And amid this progress, something even more extraordinary happened. Art and culture, which had once been a reflection of humanity's triumphs and comforts, now took on a new meaning. The songs of the past, the myths, the stories of gods and men began to evolve, blending with the stories of survival, of struggle, of human ingenuity in the face of overwhelming odds. Music became not just an expression of joy, but of resilience, of sorrow, of hope. architecture, too, shifted. The buildings that once stood as monuments to human grandeur were replaced with structures that harmonized with the natural world. Earth and stone, wood and water became the building blocks of a new civilization that sought not to dominate nature, but to coexist with it. The age of grand monuments gave way to the age of sustainable living. It was in this environment that new societies began to form, and old ones rooted in ancient traditions found new meaning. The interplay between the ancient world and the new began to shape humanity's future. The rise of empires was no longer about conquest, but about knowledge and shared wisdom. The great philosophers of the time looked not to the stars for answers, but to the very soil beneath their feet, learning to read the land as though it were sacred text. But even as humanity rose to new heights of ingenuity, the challenges of the environment were far from over. The earth was in a constant state of flux, and the climate remained unpredictable. Yet the survivors of these catastrophes, those who had lived through the great cold and the unrelenting heat, were not the same people who had once feared the earth's wrath. They had been tempered by fire, by ice, by every force of nature. They had become not just survivors, but masters of adaptation. And so the story of humanity's resilience continued, as it always had, through every trial and tribulation. The earth may have been ruthless in its tests, but humanity's spirit, unbroken, unyielding, would always find a way to rise. For it was not just in the face of nature's fury that humanity would triumph. It was in the quiet moments of creation, in the intimate bonds of families and communities, in the small acts of kindness and ingenuity that would ensure the survival of humanity for generations to come. The journey of humanity, forged through crisis and born of survival, was not just a tale of hardship, but a testament to the unwavering strength of the human spirit. Each challenge, each test, had pushed humanity to the brink of extinction, but it had also revealed the boundless capacity for creativity, for innovation, for hope. And as humanity looked to the future, one thing was certain: no matter how great the storm, no matter how fierce the fire, humanity would not simply endure. It would evolve, adapt, and emerge stronger. The earth had changed, yes, but so had humanity. It was no longer a species at the mercy of nature. It had become one with it. And in that union, there was hope. There was life. And there was a future. The movement of humanity across the earth, once thought to be a series of isolated events, now reveals itself as a sweeping saga, a narrative forged in ice, fire, and relentless perseverance. From the frozen tundra of Siberia to the sun-baked deserts of Africa, humans adapted, survived, and flourished, leaving footprints on every continent. But this was not the end of the journey. It was merely a continuation, a relentless quest for survival, for connection, and for identity. As humans spread across the globe, they encountered challenges beyond imagination, landscapes that seemed to defy life itself, environments that tested the limits of endurance. In the midst of it all, humanity not only survived but thrived, crafting new tools, shaping new identities, and forging a path toward a future that stretched beyond the horizon. The Ice Age might have gripped the planet in a deathly embrace, but it also ignited a fire of innovation within human hearts. The migration from Asia into North America was one of the first defining moments in this grand saga. The land bridge that once connected the continents was a narrow, treacherous passage. Yet across this frozen expanse, Small bands of people crossed, stepping into a vast, untouched wilderness. They ventured into a world that would test them in ways they could not yet comprehend. Every step they took was a challenge against the cold, against the unknown, and against nature itself. The landscape was vast and barren, its beauty as overwhelming as its danger. It was in these moments of hardship that the earliest sparks of human ingenuity began to shine. The first shelters were crafted from the bones of mammoths, and the first tools were forged from stone and flint. Fire became their companion, its warmth providing not only comfort, but the strength to survive the longest nights. Together, these early humans found solace in each other, united by a shared purpose to endure. Through the storms, through the freezing winds and snow, they found ways to adapt. Every day they learned something new about the land, about the creatures that roamed it, and about themselves. As time passed, the harsh environment of Beringia began to shift. The glaciers that had once stretched across the land began to retreat, revealing fertiles. The ice gave way to forests, rivers, and plains, and with these new territories came new challenges, new creatures, new climates, and new ways of life. Yet, the same unrelenting drive to survive continued to guide them. These early humans began to realize that they were not just surviving the land, they were shaping it, making it their own. They planted seeds of civilization in the fertile soil, sowing the foundations of future societies. Across the expanse of Europe, the migration was no less dramatic. From the caves of Lascaux to the rolling hills of Anatolia, the landscape was as beautiful as it was brutal. The mountains loomed large in the distance, their peaks shrouded in mist and mystery. And yet it was here, in this harsh environment, that humanity learned the delicate art of survival. In the deep caves of Europe, the echoes of early humans' artistic expression can still be heard today. The paintings on the walls of Lascaux are more than mere depictions of animals. They are symbols of survival, of a people who revered the world around them and sought to understand it. In these darkened sanctuaries, humans sought not only shelter, but meaning. They etched their connection to the earth into the very walls, creating art that would outlast their own time. But life was not just about survival. It was also about creativity, about finding joy in the small moments, and about building a future for those who would follow. They created tools to help them in their daily struggles, spears for hunting, knives for crafting, and baskets for gathering. They built shelters to protect their families, and in the warmth of their homes, they celebrated the beauty of life. The migration of humanity was not solely a story of struggle and hardship. It was also one of triumph, of the human spirit rising above adversity. As humanity spread across the globe, they encountered new landscapes, new climates, and new challenges. The deserts of Africa, the rainforests of South America, the cold northern plains, all were transformed by human ingenuity. The deserts were not barren wastelands, but places where humans could adapt, learn, and grow. In the vast Sahara, they harnessed the power of the sun, building complex systems to collect water, to irrigate their crops, and to survive. In the forests of the Amazon, they learned to live in harmony with nature, using the land's resources without depleting them, creating sustainable communities that flourished for centuries. And in the frozen wastes of the Arctic, humanity learned to embrace the cold, developing tools and clothing to survive even in the harshest climates. But no challenge was greater than the one posed by the shifting climate. The Earth's climate was never static. It ebbed and flowed, with periods of intense cold, like the Younger Dryas, followed by warming periods. It was during these colder periods that humanity's resilience was tested to its limits. Ice sheets expanded, rivers froze, and the world seemed to close in on itself. Yet even then, humanity did not falter. They moved across the globe in search of new territories, new food sources, and new opportunities. They followed the migrating herds of animals, learning to track them over vast distances. And when the glaciers finally began to retreat, when the Ice Age began to thaw, humanity was ready to take its place in a world that had changed forever. The new world that emerged from the thaw was a world of possibilities, a world where humanity could build upon the foundation laid by their ancestors. In the fertile plains of the Middle East, they domesticated animals, built cities, and began the first steps toward civilization. In the vast steppes of Central Asia, they tamed the horse and revolutionized transportation and warfare. And in the dense forests of Europe, they established communities that would eventually give rise to the great empires of the ancient world. Human migration had brought them to the threshold of a new era, an era where the world was no longer a distant and uncharted wilderness, but a place of interconnected peoples, cultures, and civilizations. From the depths of the caves to the heights of the mountains, from the vast deserts to the jungles of the Amazon, humanity had carved out a place for itself on earth. And as they looked toward the future, they knew that the journey was far from over. The world, vast and wild, still held countless challenges, but with the strength, creativity, and resilience that had carried them thus far, humanity would continue to adapt and thrive. The story of human migration is not a tale of simple survival, but a saga of transformation, a story of how humanity turned the harshest environments into home, how they turned adversity into opportunity, and how they shaped the world around them. From the ice of the north to the heat of the south, from the mountains to the oceans, humanity's journey continues one step, one migration at a time. The world had once known warmth, a gentler era, where ice was a distant memory. But now, with the onset of the Younger Dryas, the earth seemed to fall into a cruel freeze, a dramatic shift that caught humanity at its most vulnerable. The world was gripped in an icy vice, and it felt as if the planet itself was exhaling its last breath. A sharp chill descended on the land, sweeping across the vast plains and forests, changing the landscape forever. Temperatures once favorable for survival plummeted, sending animals, plants, and human beings into a desperate struggle. The warming period of the Holocene, which had ushered in the rise of civilizations and the flourishing of agriculture, was ripped away, leaving only the cruel, merciless grip of cold. What followed was a catastrophe unlike any the earth had witnessed, a chilling climatic episode known as the Younger Dryas. It was as if the earth itself was punishing its inhabitants for a prosperity long taken for granted. A time of abundance quickly became a time of scarcity, and the delicate balance of life that had thrived for centuries seemed destined to unravel. The very cycles that had shaped human life, the seasons, the migrations, the growth of crops, were upended. This was not just a cold snap. This was a cataclysm, one that threatened to undo the progress of millennia. Humanity stood at a crossroads, adapt or perish. The stakes were higher than ever, and the clock was ticking. The survival of entire communities depended on their ability to endure this unforgiving climate shift. As the wind howled, The landscapes turned into desolate wastelands. Forests withered under a canopy of frost. Rivers froze solid, and herds of game, once plentiful, became elusive shadows. People huddled together in makeshift shelters, seeking refuge from the bone-chilling cold. Fires, once a symbol of warmth and comfort, now became the very lifeline, the one constant that could stave off the darkness and cold. Without fire, survival was uncertain, and so the ability to kindle it became sacred. The crackle of flames became the heartbeat of each small community, reminding them that life still pulsed, however faintly. In the midst of this hardship, however, there was a flicker of defiance. Humanity, in its darkest hour, began to forge its path forward. There was a quiet, unspoken resolve in every action. The crafting of tools, the sharing of food, the caring for the sick and the young. These moments of human warmth, though small and fragile, became the pillars that held the fragile fabric of society together. It was as though the very act of survival itself became a testament to human ingenuity and resilience. These people were not merely reacting to the forces of nature. They were actively engaging with it, bending it to their will in ways their ancestors could never have imagined. The tools they fashioned in this dire time were not just practical instruments. They were symbols of a will to survive, to adapt, and to overcome. Even as the world seemed to unravel around them, humans demonstrated a remarkable capacity for reinvention. Weapons, tools, and structures began to evolve. The old methods of hunting became inadequate, so new strategies were born, adapting to the changing environment. Hunting itself became more than a necessity. It became a delicate balance between life and death, with each animal secured symbolizing not just food, but hope. Early forms of agriculture, though primitive, began to take shape as humans learned to adapt their farming practices to the hostile conditions. They sought out new, hardier crops, and innovative techniques for survival began to emerge. But it wasn't just survival tactics that were being tested during this time. It was the very essence of what it meant to be human. Communities, once spread out and isolated, began to come together more closely than ever before. The threat of extinction drove them into a unity born of necessity, but that unity would, in the long run, lay the foundation for the thriving societies that would eventually emerge from the ashes of this great crisis. The shock of the Younger Dryas was not confined to a single region. It was global in scope, rippling across the planet, reshaping the landscape of human civilization. While the immediate effect was one of harsh cold and ecological devastation, the consequences were far-reaching. The events of the Younger Dryas were felt in every corner of the earth. The mammoths, great symbols of the Ice Age, disappeared from the North American tundra, their mighty forms vanishing into the mists of time. The great plains that had once teemed with wild game became barren stretches of frozen earth, incapable of sustaining life. Yet in the face of this extinction event, humanity showed an extraordinary resilience. In the caves of what would one day be known as Europe, ancient paintings of bison and mammoths were scrawled on the walls, echoes of a world on the edge of collapse. These paintings were not simply the work of artists. They were prayers, reminders of what had been, and a desperate wish for the survival of what could still be. Humanity in these desperate times turned to art not only as a form of expression, but as a way to maintain connection to the world that was slipping away. The cold, however, was not the only enemy humanity faced. With the cooling of the earth came another danger, The retreat of the great forests, the drying up of once vibrant rivers, and the collapse of ecosystems that had supported entire species. The fertile lands that had once yielded abundant crops were now frozen under layers of ice and snow, rendering agriculture impossible. The seasonal migrations that had once guided the movement of both humans and animals were disrupted, forcing both to adapt quickly or face annihilation. In the face of these dire circumstances, early human societies turned to each other for support. In the caves and camps that sprang up as makeshift settlements, communities found strength in solidarity. The survival of the group became paramount, and individuals' needs were secondary to the well-being of the collective. It was a time where survival was a shared experience, where bonds were forged in the crucible of adversity. Families gathered around fires, sharing stories of times before the cold, and passing down knowledge of the land and its rhythms. In these moments of shared humanity, there was hope. In the midst of this global upheaval, ancient technologies were re-examined and refined. The first bows and arrows, crafted with remarkable skill, became not only weapons of necessity, but symbols of human innovation. Even as the ice seemed to advance, humanity advanced in turn, finding ways to push back against the cold. Archaeological findings from this time reveal the presence of these weapons, which were made from the bones of the very animals that were being hunted to extinction. Yet despite the hardships, something extraordinary happened. The survivors, through their ingenuity and adaptability, did not merely cling to life, they thrived. They learned to navigate a world that had been altered beyond recognition. They found new ways to live, to work, and to build. And though the younger Dryas may have torn the fabric of the old world apart, it also created the conditions for a new world to emerge. The struggle for survival, though brutal and harsh, also led to the seeds of great innovation and social transformation. The tools that were forged in this cold epoch became the foundation for a new society, one that would over time spread across the earth. The lessons learned during this time would echo through the ages, carried by those who survived and passed on their knowledge to their descendants. The younger Dryas, though it brought the world to the brink of collapse, also marked the beginning of a new chapter in human history, a chapter defined by the survival of the fittest, but also by the survival of the wisest. Through their unity, their creativity, and their unrelenting will to live, humanity would rise from the ashes of the Ice Age. As the earth warmed once again, as the glaciers receded and the world slowly recovered, the survivors of the younger Dryas looked toward the future, not with fear, but with the knowledge that they had faced the end of the world and emerged victorious. Their legacy was not just the tools they left behind or the art they created. It was the spirit of survival itself, the relentless drive to adapt, innovate, and endure. And as the ice retreated and the earth began to heal, humanity would move forward, stronger and more united than ever before. The younger Dryas was not merely an epic of destruction. It was a time of transformation, of growth, and of human triumph. It was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, humanity will find a way to survive. As the cold continued to grip the earth, a quiet battle raged between the human spirit and the ruthless forces of nature. The ice had not yet relinquished its hold on the world, and for every step forward, humanity took 2 steps back. Yet, in the face of extreme adversity, something extraordinary was taking place. The human race, once scattered and vulnerable, was learning to adapt, to survive, and, against all odds, to thrive. The harshness of the world served as a constant reminder of the fragility of life, yet it also sharpened humanity's ability to innovate, to cooperate, and to dream. The cold, unyielding ice that covered vast swaths of the land was not a mere obstacle. It was a crucible, forging a new kind of resilience that would become the hallmark of humanity's survival. It was here, in these frozen expanses, that the first lessons of adaptability were learned. Life was not just about finding shelter from the storm, but about becoming one with the world around them. Survival was not simply about brute force, but about understanding, exploiting, and shaping the environment in ways that no other species had ever done. Every small victory every day lived became a testament to the human drive to endure. From the bone dagger that pierced the flesh of the mammoth to the first flicker of fire that illuminated a family huddled together in the dark, every invention, every discovery spoke of a deep, inherent desire to rise above the chaos of the world. In these moments, the fire did not just represent warmth. It symbolized life itself, a beacon of hope in an otherwise bleak world. In the shadow of cowering ice walls, humanity's ingenuity began to shine. The invention of tools was no longer a mere necessity, but an art form, a reflection of the creativity that lay within the heart of every human. Early human communities, small and isolated, began to form bonds that transcended survival. Cooperation, once a rare instinct, became a cornerstone of human existence. The ties that bound these early humans were not just based on blood, but on shared experiences, on mutual dependence for survival. The strength of a community, united by purpose, became far greater than the sum of its parts. This cooperation, this collective will to survive, laid the groundwork for the first steps toward civilization. As the centuries passed and the ice began its slow retreat, the human race found new challenges, new opportunities. The once frozen earth began to thaw, revealing lands that had long been hidden beneath the weight of ice and snow. For the first time in generations, humanity could breathe easy. The world began to change. As the planet warmed, new possibilities opened up. The land, once inhospitable and barren, began to yield the first fruits of early agriculture. Crops were sown, tended, and harvested in a way that had never been possible before. The cycle of life, so long dependent on hunting and gathering, began to shift toward a more sustainable way of life. Yet as humanity embraced the promise of these new lands, the environment was still far from predictable. The changing climate brought with it both opportunity and danger. The once familiar patterns of nature were disrupted, and survival was no longer guaranteed. But humanity had already learned the most important lesson. They were capable of adaptation. The early farmers learned not only to sow seeds, but to shape the land itself. They dug irrigation channels to bring water to thirsty crops, built storage systems to protect their harvests, and domesticated animals to work alongside them in the fields. This was not mere survival. This was the birth of civilization. Tools evolved beyond simple stone and bone. The wheel was invented, revolutionizing transport and trade. Early settlements grew into villages, then towns, and eventually cities. Humanity's ingenuity transformed the landscape. It was as though the earth itself was being remade, shaped by the hands of those who had once been at its mercy. But even as humanity's reach expanded, the forces of nature remained ever present. The floods, the storms, the droughts, these were the reminders that the earth was still an unpredictable force, capable of both creation and destruction. Yet it was in these moments of disaster that the true strength of humanity became evident. In the face of loss, of suffering, and of destruction, humans did not simply retreat into despair. Instead, they rebuilt, they reimagined, and they continued to adapt. The early days of survival in the frozen wastes had given way to the creation of complex societies, but the lessons of the past were never forgotten. The importance of cooperation, of community, of sharing knowledge, these were the principles that held the fabric of civilization together. Humanity's journey had been marked by moments of both triumph and tragedy, but it was in their ability to adapt, to learn, and to grow that they found the key to their survival. As time passed, the knowledge and wisdom passed down through generations began to form the bedrock of cultures, of nations, of empires. From the discovery of fire to the invention of writing, humanity's capacity for progress seemed limitless. But even as the first empires rose and fell, the world was still shaped by the forces of nature. The environment, unpredictable as ever, remained both a threat and a muse. Yet it was here, in the heart of the ancient world, that humanity began to reach beyond survival and into the realm of creation. The pyramids of Egypt, the ziggurats of Mesopotamia, the temples of Greece and Rome, these were not just monuments to human achievement. They were symbols of humanity's ability to adapt, to dream, and to build something that would endure for millennia. But these grand achievements were not without their cost. The rise of civilization brought with it new challenges, diseases, wars, and the ever-present struggle for resources. Yet, time and time again, humanity found ways to confront these challenges, often drawing on the very lessons learned in those early days of survival. It was in the wake of disaster that human creativity shone brightest. After the fall of empires, new ideas emerged, new technologies were born, and new forms of governance were created. Through these trials, humanity learned to navigate the complexities of a rapidly changing world. The early days of survival had been about individual struggle, but now humanity's focus had shifted to the collective. The need for unity, for cooperation, for shared purpose became more important than ever. As the world moved into the future, the lessons of the past of resilience, of innovation, and of adaptability remained at the core of human progress. Even in the face of climate shift, environmental destruction, and new global challenges, humanity's capacity for survival and growth continued to amaze. The rise of modern civilization, with its cities, its technology, and its interconnectedness, was a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit. The very essence of human existence had transformed. No longer were humans bound by the harsh forces of nature. They had become masters of it. They harnessed the power of the wind, the sun, and the earth itself. Through science and technology, they built the foundation for a new world, one where survival was no longer the primary concern. And yet, in the midst of this rapid advancement, the lessons of the past were never forgotten. The stories of those early humans, of their struggles and triumphs, were passed down through generations, woven into the very fabric of culture and society. The legacy of survival, of creativity, of resilience, became a part of every human being, a reminder that no matter how far they had come, They had always been a part of something much greater. As humanity looks to the future, to the stars, to a world yet to be explored, the journey that began in the frozen wastes of the Ice Age continues. The legacy of survival is not just a story of the past. It is a story that is still being written. The challenges may be different, the environment may have changed, but the spirit of humanity remains unbroken. It is this spirit that will carry humanity forward as they continue to adapt, to dream, and to thrive in the face of whatever challenges lie ahead. The ice may have melted, the glaciers may have receded, but the fire that was ignited in those early days continues to burn bright, a beacon of hope and possibility for all who dare to dream of a future beyond the horizon. And as the storm rages on with snowflakes drifting through the air like tiny shards of glass, the people huddle together beneath the jagged rocks and overhangs, their breath misting in the cold air. The fire crackles softly in the distance, a symbol of life amidst the deathly chill that threatens to claim all it touches. In the silence of the frozen wilderness where even the birds have ceased their songs, humanity endures. The struggle to survive, born from the very essence of human nature, continues, but it is no longer just about surviving. It is about thriving in the face of overwhelming adversity, about finding meaning and purpose, even when every instinct urges retreat. Amid the icy expanse of the earth where glaciers stretch for miles, crushing everything beneath their relentless advance, humanity's spirit remains unbroken. The climate may have shifted, the landscape may have transformed, but the core of what it means to be human has not changed. It is this unyielding spirit, passed down from one generation to the next, that has carried humanity through the most brutal epochs of Earth's history. From the freezing cold of the Ice Age to the devastating eruptions that reshaped the landscape, from the relentless deserts that stretch across entire continents to the sudden catastrophes that have sent shockwaves through the planet, human beings have always found a way to adapt, to survive, and ultimately to thrive. These are not just tales of survival. They are the stories of human ingenuity, of our capacity to create beauty and meaning, even in the most hostile environments. In the face of blizzards that whip across barren landscapes and earthquakes that send tremors through the earth's very bones, humans have carved out spaces for warmth, for love, and for hope. The caves where our ancestors painted intricate symbols of their world, the fire pits where families gathered to share stories and warmth, these are the spaces where humanity's true strength is found. They are not just survival tactics. They are the essence of what it means to be human. Even as the earth undergoes violent shifts, as temperature drops and ecosystems collapse, we find ways to express our humanity, to build connections, to bond. The tools we crafted, the art we created, and the language we spoke all served to remind us that no matter how bleak the world might seem, there is always hope, always potential for something greater. As the years passed and the climate changed, humanity's adaptability only became more apparent. The ice that once covered vast swaths of land retreated, but in its wake, new challenges emerged. The land that had once been a frozen wasteland became an unforgiving desert, vast and empty, with little shelter from the scorching heat. Yet even here, humans found ways to survive. The same ingenuity that had allowed our ancestors to craft weapons from stone and bone was now being put to use in the creation of tools that could help them find water, grow food, and navigate the harsh, arid environment. With each step, humanity demonstrated its ability not only to survive, but to innovate. The evolution of agriculture, the domestication of animals, and the development of permanent settlements marked a new chapter in human history. And yet, even as we adapted to our surroundings, we never lost sight of the essence of what it meant to be human. Throughout the centuries, our art, our stories, and our culture continued to flourish, even as the world around us changed. It was in the heat of the desert sun, in the heart of the volcanic islands, and in the frozen tundras that humanity's creativity shone brightest. It is this ability to create, to connect, and to adapt that has been the key to our survival, not just as individuals, but as a species. But as we look to the future, we must remember that the world is still changing. The challenges we face today are not dissimilar to those faced by our ancestors. The earth is once again shifting beneath our feet, and climate change threatens to alter the landscape in ways that we can only begin to imagine. Rising sea levels, extreme weather events, and the destruction of ecosystems are just a few of the challenges we will have to overcome. Yet, just as our ancestors did, we will find a way to adapt. We will use the lessons of the past to guide us, drawing on the same resilience and ingenuity that has carried us through the darkest times in history. In the face of these challenges, we will not retreat. We will push forward as we always have. We will innovate, we will create, and we will thrive. It is this spirit, this relentless drive to survive and to improve, that will carry us through the storms ahead. The earth may change, the climate may shift, but the core of what it means to be human will never change. Our ability to adapt, to learn, to grow, and to create will always be the key to our survival. As we look to the future, we must remember the lessons of the past. We must remember that no matter how harsh the environment, no matter how daunting the challenges, we have always found a way to persevere. And it is through this perseverance that we will continue to shape the world around us. The future is uncertain, but one thing is certain: humanity's resilience will always be our greatest strength. And so we move forward, not in fear of what lies ahead, but with the knowledge that we are capable of facing whatever comes our way. The journey is not over. It is just beginning. In the vast expanse of the future, humanity's story will continue to unfold, chapter by chapter. With each new challenge, we will grow stronger. With each new obstacle, we will find a way to overcome it. The story of survival is not just a tale of enduring hardship. It is a story of triumph, of rising above adversity, and of creating something greater than ourselves. The story of humanity is not one of mere survival. It is one of creativity, resilience, and hope. As we look to the future, we do so with the knowledge that no matter what the world throws our way, we will continue to adapt, to innovate, and to thrive. We are not bound by the limitations of the world around us. We are the creators of our own destiny. The story of humanity is one of endless potential, and it is a story that will continue for generations to come. As we stand at the crossroads of history, we are reminded that our survival is not just about enduring the trials of today, but about preparing for the challenges of tomorrow. We are the architects of our future, and with each step forward, we are shaping a world that is richer, more resilient, and more beautiful than ever before. And so the journey continues, as it always has, and as it always will. We are the survivors, the dreamers, the builders of a better world. We are humanity, and our story is far from over. And as the storm rages on with snowflakes drifting through the air like tiny shards of glass, the people huddle together beneath the jagged rocks and overhangs, their breath misting in the cold air. The fire crackles softly in the distance, a symbol of life amidst the deathly chill that threatens to claim all it touches. In the silence of the frozen wilderness, where even the birds have ceased their songs, humanity endures. The struggle to survive, born from the very essence of human nature, continues, but it is no longer just about surviving. It is about thriving in the face of overwhelming adversity, about finding meaning and purpose even when every instinct urges retreat. Amid the icy expanse of the earth, where glaciers stretch for miles, crushing everything beneath their relentless advance, humanity's spirit remains unbroken. The climate may have shifted, the landscape may have transformed, but the core of what it means to be human has not changed. It is this unyielding spirit, passed down from one generation to the next, that has carried humanity through the most brutal epochs of Earth's history. From the freezing cold of the Ice Age to the devastating eruptions that reshaped the landscape, from the relentless deserts that stretch across entire continents to the sudden catastrophes that have sent shockwaves through the planet, human beings have always found a way to adapt, to survive, and ultimately to thrive. These are not just tales of survival. They are the stories of human ingenuity, of our capacity to create beauty and meaning even in the most hostile environments. In the face of blizzards that whip across barren landscapes and earthquakes that send tremors through the earth's very bones, humans have carved out spaces for warmth, for love, and for hope. The caves where our ancestors painted intricate symbols of their world, the fire pits where families gathered to share stories and warmth, these are the spaces where humanity's true strength is found. They are not just survival tactics. They are the essence of what it means to be human. Even as the earth undergoes violent shifts, as temperature drops and ecosystems collapse, we find ways to express our humanity, to build connections, to bond. The tools we crafted, the art we created, and the language we spoke all serve to remind us that no matter how bleak the world might seem, there is always hope, always potential for something greater. As the years passed and the climate changed, humanity's adaptability only became more apparent. The ice that once covered vast swaths of land retreated, but in its wake, new challenges emerged. The land that had once been a frozen wasteland became an unforgiving desert, vast and empty, with little shelter from the scorching heat. Yet even here, humans found ways to survive. The same ingenuity that had allowed our ancestors to craft weapons from stone and bone was now being put to use in the creation of tools that could help them find water, grow food, and navigate the harsh, arid environment. With each step, humanity demonstrated its ability not only to survive, but to innovate. The evolution of agriculture, the domestication of animals, and the development of permanent settlements marked a new chapter in human history. And yet, even as we adapted to our surroundings, we never lost sight of the essence of what it meant to be human. Throughout the centuries, our art, our stories, and our culture continued to flourish even as the world around us changed. It was in the heat of the desert sun, in the heart of the volcanic islands, and in the frozen tundras that humanity's creativity shone brightest. It is this ability to create, to connect, and to adapt that has been the key to our survival, not just as individuals, but as a species. But as we look to the future, we must remember that the world is still changing. The challenges we face today are not dissimilar to those faced by our ancestors. The earth is once again shifting beneath our feet, and climate change threatens to alter the landscape in ways that we can only begin to imagine. Rising sea levels, extreme weather events, and the destruction of ecosystems are just a few of the challenges we will have to overcome. Yet, just as our ancestors did, we will find a way to adapt. We will use the lessons of the past to guide us, drawing on the same resilience and ingenuity that has carried us through the darkest times in history. In the face of these challenges, we will not retreat. We will push forward as we always have. We will innovate, we will create, and we will thrive. It is this spirit, this relentless drive to survive and to improve, that will carry us through the storms ahead. The earth may change, the climate may shift, but the core of what it means to be human will never change. Our ability to adapt, to learn, to grow, and to create will always be the key to our survival. As we look to the future, we must remember the lessons of the past. We must remember that no matter how harsh the environment, no matter how daunting the challenges, we have always found a way to persevere. And it is through this perseverance that we will continue to shape the world around us. The future is uncertain, but one thing is certain: humanity's resilience will always be our greatest strength. And so we move forward, not in fear of what lies ahead, but with the knowledge that we are capable of facing whatever comes our way. The journey is not over. It is just beginning. In the vast expanse of the future, humanity's story will continue to unfold, chapter by chapter. With each new challenge, we will grow stronger. With each new obstacle, we will find a way to overcome it. The story of survival is not just a tale of enduring hardship. It is a story of triumph, of rising above adversity, and of creating something greater than ourselves. The story of humanity is not one of mere survival. It is one of creativity, resilience, and hope. As we look to the future, we do so with the knowledge that no matter what the world throws our way, we will continue to adapt, to innovate, and to thrive. We are not bound by the limitations of the world around us. We are the creators of our own destiny. The story of humanity is one of endless potential, and it is a story that will continue for generations to come. As we stand at the crossroads of history, we are reminded that our survival is not just about enduring the trials of today, but about preparing for the challenges of tomorrow. We are the architects of our future, and with each step forward, we are shaping a world that is richer, more resilient, and more beautiful than ever before. And so the journey continues, as it always has, and as it always will. We are the survivors, the dreamers, the builders of a better world. We are humanity, and our story is far from over. The wind howls through the narrow passes between jagged peaks, whipping the snow into blinding torrents that stung the skin like thousands of icy needles. The air, thin and bitter with the scent of frost, seemed to freeze every breath in the chest, turning the lungs to ice with each inhale. Yet, despite this, the people pressed on, trudging through the deep drifts, their faces obscured by furs, their hands wrapped around weapons and tools, eyes scanning the horizon. Survival in this unforgiving world had become a daily struggle, but it was more than that. It was an ancient rhythm, the heartbeat of the earth itself, driving humanity to endure, to adapt, to thrive. As the glaciers that had once ruled the land began to retreat, they left behind a barren wilderness, a harsh reminder of what the earth could be like when the forces of nature were at their most brutal. The ice was receding, yes, but it was not alone in its departure. A new threat loomed on the horizon, a fire that would scorch the earth in its wake. The eruption of volcanoes in the far-off lands to the south sent ash and smoke into the sky, darkening the heavens and choking the sun. The temperature began to plummet, each day colder than the last, as the earth entered a new, deadly phase, a time when the struggle for survival would become even more desperate, and yet even more profound. Yet, amid the devastation, humanity remained resilient. In the shadow of the volcanoes, in the deep caves where the air was still, they gathered. Family units huddled close, sharing what little warmth they could generate by fire. The fire, small and flickering, was their lifeline, a symbol of hope in a world that seemed to grow colder by the day. The flicker of the flame cast shadows on the walls of the cave, shadows that seemed to dance in a silent celebration of the creativity that thrived even in the harshest conditions. Even here, in the depths of winter, when the earth seemed to breathe death into every corner, there was art, there was beauty. The walls of the cave were covered with intricate paintings, depicting the creatures that roamed the frozen plains, mammoths with shaggy coats, sleek predators stalking their prey, and the patterns of the stars that guided them through the night. Each stroke of pigment, each carving in the stone, was a testament to the human spirit, their need to express, to communicate, to make sense of a world that offered so little in return. And as the cold pressed in, as the storms raged, the people held tight to their bonds. In the depths of the caves, they shared stories of the past, tales of ancestors who had faced similar challenges and had found ways to endure. There, in the glow of the firelight, the family would sing their songs, their voices rising together in harmony, a fragile but unbreakable link to their shared history. In the face of the climate's relentless change, humanity was finding its own way to change as well. The tools they crafted were no longer just the means of survival. They were becoming instruments of progress. From the simple flint that sparked a fire to the more complex stone and bone tools that allowed them to hunt, build, and fashion shelter, their ingenuity was expanding. But even more remarkable was the growth of their understanding of the world. They were beginning to observe patterns in the sky, in the movement of the stars and the behavior of the animals. They knew that survival depended not just on their physical strength, but on their ability to read the signs of nature, to understand the rhythms of the earth. But with every shift in the climate, there was a corresponding shift in the landscape itself. The tundra, once covered in ice, began to thaw, revealing a new and strange world. The land was not a desert, but it was harsh in its own way, dry, cracked earth, where water was scarce, and the air itself seemed to radiate heat from the ground. Even in this environment, humanity found a way to survive. The fires they had once depended on for warmth now had a new purpose. They were used to craft new tools, to make pottery, to cook the food they hunted or gathered. They discovered how to make use of the land, how to plant seeds that would grow despite the scorching sun. They learned to domesticate animals, using them not just for food, but for transportation and protection. And even as the land around them became more hostile, humanity continued to thrive. The people began to build permanent homes, structures made from the materials they could find, from wood, stone, and animal hides. These homes were not just places to sleep. They were places to grow, to create, to connect. The fire that had once flickered in the caves now burned brightly in the hearths of these new homes, casting a warm glow on the faces of the families that gathered around it. And yet, even as humanity flourished, the earth was still changing. The temperature continued to drop as the Younger Dryas event began to take hold. The once mild climate was replaced by a deep, unrelenting cold, one that turned the rivers to ice and blanketed the land in snow. The oceans, which had once been a source of food and transportation, became unpredictable and dangerous, their waters rising and falling with the changing climate. The very earth seemed to be shifting beneath their feet. But in the face of this new challenge, humanity did not falter. They adapted once more. The shelters they had built were reinforced to withstand the cold, and their clothing grew thicker, more layered, to protect them from the biting winds. The fire, once the sole source of warmth, became a focal point of their communities, where they gathered not just to stay warm, but to share their knowledge, their stories, their wisdom. In the ice and snow, they continued to live, to create, to grow. They crafted new tools, sharpened their weapons, and expanded their understanding of the world. They learned to hunt in the snow, to navigate the frozen wilderness with skill and precision. And though the world outside seemed bleak and unforgiving, inside the shelters there was life, there was warmth, there was community. The earth may have been changing, but humanity, in all its ingenuity and resilience, remained unbroken. In the distant future, when the ice had finally receded, when the fires had burned out, and the deserts had expanded to consume what had once been fertile land, humanity would stand as a testament to the power of adaptation. The ruins of their cities, the remnants of their tools, the stories they told would be the only evidence that they had ever existed. And yet, even as time passed, their legacy would endure. For in the face of all that nature had thrown at them, storms, volcanoes, ice, fire, drought, they had found a way to thrive. And it was this spirit of resilience, of creativity, and of hope that would carry humanity into the future. The earth may change, but humanity would remain. It would always remain. The storm howled louder now, its fury almost drowning out the rhythmic pounding of the people's feet against the frozen earth. The wind was a living thing, a beast that whipped through the mountains with such ferocity that even the thickest firs barely protected against the bitter cold. The glaciers had receded, leaving behind a land scarred by the violence of nature. The sun was a rare and fleeting visitor now, hidden behind thick clouds of ash from the eruption of distant volcanoes. The earth had not known peace for millennia, and its forces seemed bent on reminding humanity of its frailty. Yet the people endured, their bodies hunched against the cold, their breaths turning to mist before them. The crackling of fires, small but precious, could be heard in the caves, offering a flickering glimpse of hope in the overwhelming darkness. The air within was thick with the scent of wood, smoke, and warmth. Families huddled together, sharing not just their food, but their stories, their laughter, their songs. The fire was more than just warmth, it was life. And from it, humanity found not only survival, but meaning. Each day felt like a battle, and yet within the caves a quiet triumph was taking place. The walls were adorned with symbols of life, painted with ochre and charcoal. The creatures of the ice, the mammoths with their thick coats and tusks that curved like the moon, the giant elk that roamed the tundra, and the mighty predators that stalked them, all found their place in the sacred space. These paintings were more than mere representations. They were prayers, offerings to the spirits that watched over the hunters. The artists, their hands stained with pigment, worked with reverence, their eyes tracing the contours of the animals' forms as though they could capture their essence. The firelight cast long, haunting shadows across the stone, and for a moment it seemed as though the animals themselves might step from the walls and join the people by the hearth. But the world outside was unforgiving. The fires in the sky had darkened the heavens, and the air had grown colder with each passing season. The younger Dryas had arrived, a time of deep freeze that would last for centuries. The rivers, once swollen with the melting ice, were now solid sheets of ice, their waters frozen beneath the thick blanket of snow. The forests that had once offered shelter were dying, their trees stripped of life by the harsh cold. The ground, once soft and fertile, had become a frozen wasteland, unyielding to the touch. Yet even in this desolation, there was hope. The people had learned the ways of the land, how to make fire from stone, how to weave the bones of the animals into tools, and how to navigate the frozen expanse with a skill that had become second nature. The struggle for survival had bred a resilience that could not be broken. Their eyes were no longer just fixed on the ground before them. They had learned to look upward, to the stars, to the heavens themselves. The sky, once a vast and mysterious void, was now a guide. The patterns of the stars were no longer just beautiful. They were a map, a key to understanding the rhythms of the earth. The people had begun to observe the movements of the stars, the changing of the seasons, the cycles of the animals. They could predict when the mammoths would roam the plains, when the rivers would thaw, when the cold would be at its peak. They had learned to read the signs of the world, and in doing so, they had begun to tame it. But the climate continued to shift. As the volcanoes in the south raged, spewing ash into the sky, the temperatures began to plummet. The world was being reshaped, both above and below the earth. The glaciers were growing again, slowly but inexorably, creeping down from the mountains, covering the land in their cold embrace. The world was becoming a place of ice and fire, of drought and flood. The people, however, did not falter. They adapted. The caves, once their only refuge, were now home to entire communities. Inside, they built their shelters from wood, bone, and stone. The fire, still their most precious possession, became the center of life, the source of warmth, light, and sustenance. It was not just a tool, it was a symbol of their survival, of their ability to endure. And as the fire burned, so too did their creativity. The people began to craft new tools, more sophisticated than before. The flint that had once been used only to start fires was now fashioned into sharp blades for hunting, axes for chopping wood, and scrapers for cleaning the hides of the animals they hunted. The bones of the mammoths and the woolly rhinos were shaped into needles for sewing clothes, into spear points for hunting, into ornaments that adorned the bodies of the people. Art, once confined to the walls of the caves, now found its way into their daily lives. The clothes they wore were embroidered with symbols, patterns that told stories of the animals they hunted, the dreams they had, the spirits they revered. Even in the face of destruction, humanity had found a way to create, to express itself, yet the earth was not done with its challenges. The fires that raged to the south were not the only threat. The land, once covered in ice, was beginning to dry out. The desert was expanding, swallowing the once fertile plains, pushing the people into even harsher environments. The rivers that had once provided a source of food and water were now nothing but dry beds, cracked and parched. The sun beat down upon the land with a fierceness that had not been felt in generations. The people had to adapt once more. They learned to make use of the land in new ways, to harvest the sparse vegetation that remained, to hunt the creatures that had adapted to the changing climate. They learned to dig wells for water, to build reservoirs to collect the precious rain when it came. The fire, which had once been their source of warmth, now became a tool for cooking, for forging metal, for creating pottery to store food and water. Even as the world seemed to grow more hostile, humanity continued to thrive. The people learned to domesticate animals, using them not just for food, but for transport and protection. They bred animals for their strength, their endurance, their ability to carry loads across the shifting terrain. The herding of animals, once a survival strategy, had become a way of life. The homes they built were no longer temporary shelters, but permanent structures. They crafted homes from the bones of the animals they hunted, from the stone that was scattered across the land, from the wood that they could find. These homes were places of comfort, of community, of growth. The fire that had once flickered in the caves now burned brightly in the hearths of these new homes, casting a warm glow on the faces of the families who gathered around it. And yet, even as the world around them seemed to be falling apart, humanity found a way to celebrate. The festivals that had once marked the changing of the seasons were now opportunities to give thanks for the harvest, to honor the spirits, to reaffirm the bonds of family and community. The music of the people filled the air, their songs echoing through the caves and across the plains. The dance of the people was not just a celebration of life, but a defiance of death. Even in the face of an unforgiving world, they celebrated the most human of instincts, to endure, to create, to live. The world outside was a place of fire and ice, of desolation and rebirth. But inside the homes, the caves, the hearts of the people, there was warmth, there was love, there was life. The earth had changed, and the people had changed with it. They had adapted, they had survived, and they had thrived. And as the ice slowly retreated, as the volcanoes ceased their eruptions, as the deserts expanded and the forests died, the people remained. The world might have changed, but humanity's spirit would endure. It was a testament to their resilience, to their ingenuity, to their ability to find hope even in the darkest of times. The earth would continue to change, to shift, to challenge them. But as long as the fire burned, as long as the people gathered together in warmth and song, they would never be defeated. And in the end, it was not the land that defined them, but the strength of their spirit, the power of their creativity, and the unbreakable bonds that united them as one. The legacy of humanity, carved into the stone of the caves, painted on the walls, sung in the songs, would live on long after the last embers of the fire had died. And so, in the face of the ice, the fire, the drought, and the storm, humanity would continue. They would endure, they would adapt, and they would thrive. For no matter how much the earth might change, humanity would always remain. It would always remain. The wind, relentless and howling, never ceased. It had been like this for seasons. Now, no rest from its icy fury. The mountains had grown taller in the distance, and their once sturdy peaks now crowned with glaciers that slowly crawled downwards, like nature itself reclaiming the world. The land, once marked by the soft green of summer, was now shrouded in an eternal winter. The storm clouds gathered constantly, darkening the sky, as if they too were waiting for something. Below, the rivers that had once carved their paths through the earth had become frozen rivers of stone, their waters locked away beneath a thick blanket of ice. The forest that had given shelter to countless animals, to the people who had once hunted there, now stood barren, its trees gnarled, skeletal, stripped of life by the unrelenting cold. Yet, even in the face of such desolation, the people did not falter. They had learned to live with the ice, to move through the frozen wilderness with a grace born of necessity. Their breaths came out in puffs of steam as they trudged through the snow, their footsteps leaving deep impressions in the soft white powder. The furs they wore were thick and layered, stitched together with the bones of the great beasts they had hunted. These were their shields, their protection against the biting wind, but they were also symbols of their survival, of their defiance against the land's harshness. The fires that flickered in their caves were more than just warmth. They were the beating heart of their communities. Around these flames, families gathered, their faces illuminated in the soft, golden glow. Their voices rose in song, a harmonious chorus that echoed through the stone walls, carrying with it the weight of centuries of tradition. They sang of the earth, of the creatures that had once roamed the plains, of the ancestors who had passed before them. Each song was a prayer, a plea for mercy, for the strength to endure. It was in these moments that the people found their resilience, their unity. Art, too, had become a way for them to express what words could not. The walls of the caves were adorned with paintings, intricate symbols of the animals they had hunted, the spirits they believed in. The images of mammoths, with their long curling tusks and shaggy fur, stared back at them from the walls as if frozen in time. But there was more to these paintings than mere decoration. They were stories, records of the past and hopes for the future, capturing the essence of the creatures they relied on for survival. The artists, their hands stained with pigment, had learned to see the world not just with their eyes, but with their hearts. The way the mammoth's tusks curved in the light, the graceful sweep of its trunk, all of it was captured with reverence. The people had learned to read the signs in the land, to understand the ebb and flow of the world around them. The stars, once distant and unknowable, were now their guides. They traced the constellations across the night sky, charting their movements and learning to predict the changing of the seasons. The stars were no longer just a backdrop to the world. They were a map, a key to survival. In the quiet of the night, when the winds outside howled and the storms raged, the people would sit together by the fire, their heads tilted upward, watching the heavens. They spoke of the patterns they saw, of the creatures that would come with the changing of the seasons, of the warmth that would eventually return with the thaw. But even as they learned to read the sky, the earth below them was shifting. The volcanoes to the south, which had once been mere specks on the horizon, were now a constant presence. Their eruptions sent clouds of ash into the sky, blocking out the sun and sending temperatures plummeting. The ice sheets grew, expanding slowly but surely, creeping down from the mountain peaks, swallowing the land in their cold embrace. It was the younger Dryas, the deep freeze that had gripped the planet for centuries. The winters were longer, the summers shorter, and the world seemed to be on the edge of a new and unforgiving age. Yet within the caves, the warmth of the fire kept the chill at bay. It was here that the people found solace. Here they crafted tools, sharp blades for hunting, axes for cutting wood, needles for sewing the hides of the animals they had slain. Every tool, every piece of art was a testament to their ingenuity, to their ability to survive. They had learned to make the most of what the land offered, to shape it to their needs. The bones of the mammoths were fashioned into needles, scrapers, and tools, each one crafted with care, each one essential for their survival. The fire, always burning, was their most precious resource. It was more than just a tool, it was a lifeline. In its glow, they could see one another. They could hear one another. It was the warmth of their homes, the light that pushed back the darkness. Without it, there was only the cold. And yet, even as the land grew colder, even as the animals that once roamed the earth in abundance became scarcer, the people had learned to adapt. They had learned to hunt new creatures, to find new ways of gathering food. The creatures of the ice, the mammoths, the woolly rhinos, the great elk, had retreated further into the wilderness, but they had not disappeared entirely. The people followed them, learning the ways of the land, the signs of the animals, the rhythms of the earth. They built shelters from the bones and skins of the creatures they hunted, creating homes that were warm, sturdy, and enduring. And even as the world outside grew harsher, the people found reasons to celebrate. The festivals, once a way to mark the changing of the seasons, had become an expression of their resilience. They danced around the fires, their bodies moving in rhythm with the beat of the drums, their faces alight with the glow of the flames. These were not just celebrations, they were affirmations of life, of their refusal to be defeated. In the face of the earth's fury, in the face of the endless storm and the creeping ice, they found joy, they found beauty. And even as the land shifted beneath their feet, even as the volcanoes erupted and the deserts expanded, the people remained. They adapted. They learned. They survived. And through it all, the fire continued to burn, a beacon of hope in a world that seemed determined to destroy everything it had once been. The land had changed, and the people had changed with it. They had become something more than mere survivors. They had become a testament to the strength of the human spirit, to the power of creativity and community. The fires that burned in their homes were more than just warmth. They were the embodiment of their will to live, to thrive, to create. The storms outside may have raged, the glaciers may have crept ever closer, but the people were undaunted. They had found a way to endure, and in doing so they had forged a new future one, where the fires of their hearts could never be extinguished, no matter how cold the world became. The earth would continue to change, but humanity's spirit would endure. The future, though uncertain, held promise. For as long as the people gathered together, as long as the fire burned, they would continue to thrive. And in the end, the world might be cold, it might be unforgiving, but the fire of humanity would never be extinguished. It would burn on, bright and strong, a light in the darkness that would never fade. The storm would pass, the ice would recede, the fire would remain, and the people would continue as they always had to endure, to create, to live. 20 o'clock to 10,000, 0 hours, 0 minutes, and 15 seconds, 000.